from a 5-ton training tractor to a 188-ton steel anomaly that defied the laws of logistics. The German Panzer Waffe was a decade-long experiment in engineering hubris. We are dissecting 20 distinct hulls that defined the Blitzkrieg, the desperate defensive stand, and the final descent into paper tank delusions. This is not a history lesson. It is a technical autopsy of how Germany traded tactical mobility for a suicidal obsession with heavy plate. By the end, we'll reach the E-100, the monster meant to reset the rules of armored warfare. Chapter 1. The Blitzkrieg Architects. Panzer I, Sd.Kfz 101. The Panzer I was the Reich's illicit cradle, masked as an agricultural tractor. This 5.4-ton machine was never intended for tank-on-tank duels. Armed with twin 7.92mm MG-13S, its 13mm skin could be breached by an anti-tank rifle at half a kilometer. Yet it was the essential laboratory for the crew-commander synergy that would later shock Europe. In Poland, it was the numerical backbone, forcing crews to master the art of the flank because a frontal engagement meant certain death. Panzer II, Sd.Kfz 121. By 1940, the Panzer II was the unexpected spearhead of the Fallgelb. Despite its 10-ton weight and mediocre 14.5mm armor, its 20mm KWK-30 autocannon turned it into a lethal suppression platform against infantry and light emplacements. It wasn't its firepower that won France, but its 3-man crew layout and integrated radio, features that allowed German commanders to outthink Allied tanks that were technically superior but tactically deaf and blind. Panzer 35T. After the annexation of Czechoslovakia, the Wehrmacht inherited the LT VIII 35, a machine arguably more advanced than the Panzer II. It featured a sophisticated, though temperamental, pneumatic shifting system and a 37mm gun that could punch through 30mm of armor at 500 meters. However, the pneumatic lines froze solid during the first Russian winter of 1941, turning these mechanical gems into immobile steel coffins, a harsh lesson in the difference between parade ground engineering and Eastern Front reality. Panzer 38T. Reliability had a name, the 38T. This Czech masterpiece used high-grade riveted steel and a robust engine that made early German designs look like prototypes. Its 37mm Skoda gun was a reliable T-26 killer, but its fatal flaw was internal. The high-carbon steel was so brittle that an external hit from a large, high-explosive shell would shatter the rivets inside, turning them into lethal shrapnel for the crew. Even so, its chassis was so efficient, it survived the entire war in various deadly mutations. Panzer III, Sd.Kfz 141. The PZ-3 was the tactical heart of the Panzer Waffe, designed with a massive 1,500mm turret ring to allow for growth. It pioneered the dedicated 3-man turret. Early versions struggled with 37mm guns against heavy French armor, but the J model's long 5cm KWK-39 allowed it to engage T-34s at medium ranges. It was the first modern tank, balancing speed, protection, and firepower, but it hit its limit when it couldn't physically mount. The 7.5cm long gun required to survive the 1943 meat grinder. Chapter 2. The Evolving Workhorses. Panzer IV, Sd.Kfz 161, the Begleitwagen, or support vehicle, that outlived its specialists. Starting as an infantry support tank with a short-barreled cigar gun, the PZ-4, Ausf G and H became the primary tank killers of the mid-war. By fitting the 7.5cm KWK-40 L-48, it gained the ability to crack 100mm of armor from 1,000 meters. It was the only German tank to remain in production from 1939 to 1945, representing the last vestige of industrial pragmatism before the obsession with heavy cats took over. StuG III, Sd.Kfz 142. Statistically, the deadliest vehicle in the German arsenal. By removing the Panzer III's turret, engineers created a low-profile assault gun that was cheaper to build and easier to hide. The StuG III, Ausf Jishi, accounted for more tank kills than any other German vehicle. Its lack of a turret was a tactical trade-off. It was useless in a meeting engagement, but devastating in an ambush. Its 80mm of frontal armor and 7.5cm gun made it the ultimate budget-friendly solution for a retreating army. Jagdpanzer IV, known as Guderian's duck due to its low, nose-heavy silhouette. This was a purpose-built tank hunter on a PZ-4 chassis. Its extremely sloped 80mm front plate gave it effective protection, far beyond its weight class. The late-war L-70 version carried the same lethal long gun as the Panther, but the sheer weight of the weapon strained the front suspension to the breaking point, requiring steel-rimmed road wheels just to keep the vehicle from digging its own nose into the mud. Panther, Panzer V. The Panther was a 45-ton medium tank that outclassed every heavy tank in the world upon its debut. Its 7.5cm KWK-42 had enough kinetic energy to punch through nearly any Allied tank at distances where the enemy couldn't even see the Panther's muzzle flash. But the technology was ahead of the manufacturing. The complex double torsion bar suspension and the catastrophic final drive failures meant that for every hour of combat, the Panther required 10 hours of maintenance. It was a technological marvel, strangled by its own complexity. Jagdpanther, Sd.Kfz 173, widely considered the best tank destroyer of the war. It mated the Panther's mobility and sloped armor, with the Tiger II's legendary 8.8cm PAK-43. This was the pinnacle of the Panzer II concept, a vehicle that could relocate at 46 km/h and destroy any Allied tank from 3,000 meters. Unlike the heavy cats, it had a decent power-to-weight ratio, but Allied air superiority made its 80mm of frontal armor irrelevant, as bombs dropped on its thin roof. Chapter 3. The Heavy Counterattack. Tiger I, Panzer VI, Ausf. The Tiger I was a psychological terror. Its 8.8cm gun could vaporize an M4 Sherman before the American crew entered their own firing range. With 100mm of face-hardened steel, it forced the Allies to develop entirely new tactics and specialized Firefly tanks just to survive, but its cost was unsustainable. For every Tiger built, Germany could have produced 3 StuG IIIs. It was a tactical titan but a strategic black hole that drained the Reich's dwindling resources. Ferdinand, Elefant, Sd.Kfz 184. Born from Porsche's failed Tiger prototype, this 65-ton behemoth was a casualty of over-engineering. It used a petrol-electric drive that was prone to catching fire on steep inclines. During its debut at Kursk, many were lost, not to enemy fire, but to their lack of a defensive machine gun, allowing Soviet infantry to disable them with satchel charges. Later refitted with an MG-34 and a cupola as the Elefant, it remained a slow, unrecoverable fortress that usually ended its life being blown up by its own crew after running out of fuel. Tiger II, King Tiger. The Tiger II represented the absolute limit of World War II tank design. Its 150mm sloped, glossy, was never officially penetrated in combat by an Allied tank gun. The 8.8cm KWK-43 L-71 was arguably the most accurate and lethal anti-tank gun of the era. However, weighing 68 tons, it was powered by the same 700 horsepower engine as the Panther. This massive power deficit meant the transmission lived in a state of constant, near failure. It was a king that could barely walk, often abandoned on the roadside due to a simple broken gear. Jagdtiger, Sd.Kfz 186, the heaviest armored fighting vehicle to see series production in World War II. At 71 tons, it carried a massive 12.8cm PAK-44 gun, capable of destroying any tank from over 4,000 meters, beyond the visual range of most tank commanders. But it was a mechanical nightmare. The recoil of the 12.8cm gun was so violent, it would often knock the sighting optics out of alignment after just a few shots. Most of the 88 units built were lost to mechanical breakdown or Allied aircraft rather than direct tank combat. Sturmtiger, a desperate urban warfare monster, built on salvaged Tiger I chassis. It fired a 380mm rocket-propelled mortar, originally designed as a depth charge against submarines. A single hit could level an entire city block. With 150mm of frontal armor, it was a specialized siege engine, but it arrived far too late. By 1944, Germany was retreating, and a weapon designed to destroy buildings was useless against an enemy that moved fast and struck from the air. Chapter 4. The Final Delusion. Hetzer, Jagdpanzer 38T. The most successful late-war compromise. Based on the 38T chassis but heavily modified, the Hetzer was tiny, cheap, and carried a punchy 7.5-centimeter gun. It was the only late-war German vehicle that was truly efficient to produce. Its armor was sloped so aggressively that it could bounce rounds from Soviet 85mm guns. Its only flaws were ergonomic. The loader had to work across the gun breech, and the vision was terrible. It was the gorilla of the tank world, fighting long after the heavy tanks had run out of fuel. E50 E75, the standard series. The Entwicklung, or E series, was Germany's last-ditch attempt to standardize its chaotic production. The E50 was meant to replace the Panther, and the E75 the Tiger II, sharing the same engines, cooling systems, and suspension. They featured Belleville washer suspensions located outside the hull, freeing up internal space and making repairs in the field actually possible. They represented what the Panzer Waffe should have been: standardized, powerful, and logistically sane. But they remained steel ghosts on engineering blueprints. E100, the competitor, the rival to the Maus. The E100 was designed as a practical, super-heavy tank. Weighing 140 tons, it used a more conventional layout than the Maus and was intended to carry a 150mm or 170mm gun. Only one chassis was partially completed. It featured a unique side skirt system. That acted as spaced armor, designed to detonate incoming shells before they hit the main hull. It was the final evolution of the bigger is better philosophy that ultimately paralyzed the German war machine. Panzer VIII Maus, 188 tons of engineering insanity. The Maus was a mobile fortress with 240mm of turret armor and a dual-gun setup. It was so heavy, it would sink into normal soil and crush any bridge it touched. Its solution? A snorkel and a generator cable to drive across riverbeds, while another Maus on the bank supplied power. It was the ultimate dead end, a tank that could win any engagement but could never reach one. Only two were built, neither fired a shot in combat. Kugelpanzer, the Enigma. The weirdest entry in the inventory, a spherical, one-man reconnaissance vehicle, found by the Soviets in 1945. Only 5mm of armor, powered by a single-cylinder engine. Its purpose remains a mystery. Was it a cable layer, a scout, a suicide craft? It sits in the Kubinka Museum today as a silent reminder that by the end, German engineering had moved past logic and into the realm of the bizarre. The evolution of the Panzerwaffe proves that better technology doesn't always win wars. Germany traded thousands of reliable, simple tanks for a handful of over-engineered wonder weapons that broke down before they saw the enemy. If you were in command in 1945, would you have prioritized the mass production of the Hetzer or banked everything on the E-Series to turn the tide? Let's fight it out in the comments. Quality versus quantity.